Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Afridi Hussein, and welcome to Islam Has All the Answers, a platform for non-Muslims, Muslims, reverts to Islam, really anyone who wants to delve into the difficult questions, the ones that aren't frequently asked about. If you'd like to come on to the channel next, sign up using the link in the description. Thank you for tuning in to the video, letting us be a part of your day or night. Gather your friends, gather your family as we embark on a journey of conversations. Today, we have Romeo Romero, a revert to Islam, who is here to ask questions centered around gender and marriage. We have Sheikh Shakiel and Sheikh Zakaria Baksh, who is here live to answer his questions. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on those bell notifications to never miss out on future content just like this. Let's welcome in our guest, Romeo, with his first question for our sheikhs. Romeo, if you can introduce yourself and start with your first question, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers.
Walaikum assalam. How's it going, Romeo?
Salam wa rahmatullah.
Everything is good. So my name is Romeo Romero, new revert. Actually, my shahada last year, August 25th.
I'm trying to.
So we'll go along. Every day's a new journey. I had a couple questions, and one of my first questions was, what are your responsibilities as a Muslim man and women as well? Like, what are the expectations? Basically, what responsibilities are we upheld to as being Muslims for both genders?
Go ahead, Sheikh.
So, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So, are you asking specifically in regards to marriage or in general?
In general, I have questions about marriage too, but I'm just saying in general. Yeah, in general.
Yeah. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran, من عمل صالحا من ذكر أو أنثى وهو مؤمن فلنحيينه حياة طيبة. Allah, He says that whoever does righteous deeds, whether and while they're a believer, whether they're male or female, then we will give them a good life. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He expects that both men and women will worship Him. We are equal in that regards as a general rule, right? So a man is expected to worship Allah Azza wa Jal the same way that a woman is expected to worship Allah. And all of us being human beings, all of the men, all of the women being human beings, Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I've only created the jinn and the humankind to worship me. So really, that's our purpose of existence for all of us, whether we're male or female. Now, there's a very important principle in our legal tradition that states that men and women are equal in terms of legal rulings. And when I say legal rulings, I mean the rulings of Allah Azza wa Jal, right? So whatever He expects of us, men and women are equal unless there's evidence to specify one gender over another. So a man and a woman is expected to pray the exact same way. They're expected to fast the exact same way, pay charity the same exact way, except where evidence would specify, and that would relate to specific roles in terms of like relationships that we have with each other, right? Like a father may not have the same exact role as the mother, Islamically speaking. And now I know, now we're going to tie into like specific relationships like marriage and things like that, right? But I think this is very important to start off the conversation, and that is to establish this general rule. And this is something very clear in the Quran.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And that basically would tie into, because there's some people who believe that in general the roles are different. So that was like a good clarification as well for me too, because I didn't know if there was any specific rules for, women or men, or if it was like any different, because I'm fairly new as well still. It's almost been a year, but I feel like I'm learning each and more every day, alhamdulillah. So that goes into my question, the responsibilities as a Muslim husband and a Muslim wife. What are those two responsibilities and expectations of those roles?
Hey, Romeo. So I just wanted to go back to the first question, and so I'm just curious of what like brought you to ask that kind of question. That question.
It was a question that was asked to me before because one of my sisters, she was thinking about, converting to Islam on Bidullah. And that was a question she had asked me because she heard that there was, different, not different expectations, but it's different being a female Muslim. So I didn't really have the answers for her. And I'm a man, so I didn't have the words to tell her like, oh, it'll be this way if you take Shahada, or you will be expected to do this, or you'll be expected to do that. I was only able to give her the knowledge that I knew specifically. So it was good insight on, to go back to her and just inform her on certain things. Inshallah, she does take the journey.
Inshallah, yeah. So I think when we speak about gender and marriage in Islam, there I think there are prerequisites as we continue our conversation. We want to understand the objectives of Islam, why Islam has certain rulings in place. So, the basic unit of a society is the individual, right? So without individuals, we won't have a society, right? So a basic unit of society is the individual, but the foundation of a society is the family. And so you will find, if you analyze all the commandments in Islam, that what it does is it preserves the basic unit of society, which is the individual, and then it also preserves the family. So there are rules and regulations in place that ensure that the family has longevity. Because the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that the most beloved thing to Satan is the breakup of a family, right? So Satan sits on his throne on the waters, and different devils come to him and tell him the evil work he's done that they have done on the earth. And then one says, I've split between a husband and a wife, and then Shaitan, the devil, says, "Come, you're close to me, right? Come towards me." And so this is the most beloved act of evil to Satan, which is to break up the family. Because once you break up the family, once there is dissonance in society, once there are problems, you break the foundation of society, then it becomes difficult for education and development and nurturing for the next generation to happen, which then compromises monotheism and tawheed, right? And so we sometimes are conditioned, if we live in certain societies, that the focus is only on the basic unit of society, which is the individual only. Right? It's all about me, what I want, my personal liberty and freedom trumps all. Right? So sometimes we're conditioned to think that way, and it doesn't matter what my spouse wants, or it doesn't matter what my parents want, or how they feel. It doesn't matter what my neighbors think. Or so Islam has this balance where it's not only about what the individual wants, but it's also about preserving the foundation of society, which is the family. And then you have other societies who go to the other extreme, where they're so focused about the family, it's all about the family, and then they compromise individual rights, right? And so individuals are not able to have civil freedoms which are enjoyed by other people. And so Islam comes with a balance between recognizing that, yes, the individual is the basic unit of a society, and that as well, that the foundation of a society is the family, that you can't have a society without a family, right? And you can't have a family without individuals. So all of them these two are tied together and are important equally. So let's keep this in mind. Well, as we move forward, a lot of the things and the commandments and things that we will talk about, inshallah, regarding gender marriage that you're curious about, will fit within this overarching principle, if that makes sense. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
Sure. And I just wanted to clarify, something before. You said the Sheikh was mentioning that the default state between the genders in Islam is that everything is equal. This does not mean that there aren't differences at times, right? Because you agree with me that a male and a female are different, right? They're not exactly the same. Right. So we have differences, biological differences, emotional differences, right? Hormonal differences, we have differences in our preferences, right? And these are all scientifically proven. And so if we are different in many ways, and then to say that the commandments and the rules and regulations should be exactly the same for both, then that can become oppressive because we're different. So what Islam does, Islam customizes and caters the regulations and commandments at times where the difference is highly noticeable or recognizable, right? As the Sheikh mentioned that, we when it comes to like worshiping Allah, worshiping God Almighty, we're all equal in that, right? We all can aspire towards pleasing God Almighty and getting paradise equally. There's no difference there. But as we inshallah, I feel like we will discuss more as we get into some of the detailed rulings between a husband and a wife, and how and marriage itself. You'll see that, okay, wait a minute, things are not equal; they're different, right?
Right.
And so the difference there, though, is important because if it weren't different, it would be unjust. So there's two separate things. One is something being equal, and then something else being just and fair. Not everything equal is fair and just, right? So
Right.
let's say if you are, let's say you are CEO of a company. You spent years in founding the company, and you are a CEO, and you're running the company. You put a lot of sleepless nights and hours to build this company, and then you have a college intern comes in, and the internship is with some pay, but the intern says to you, hey, we all have to be equal here. The six-figure salary that you're making, I must make as well from day one, because we all have to be equal. Would that make sense to you?
Absolutely not.
So if we made it equal, if we made your salary and the intern salary equal, would that be unjust?
Yes.
So there are times where equality is unjust. And Islam looks at that and says, okay, here is where it's unjust, and therefore it must be catered differently. And because there are different regulations, it doesn't mean one is inferior or superior than the other. It's fairly dividing the responsibilities, and it's fairly accommodating the nature and the difference of each gender.
Okay. I get that. I understand that. I appreciate you for clearing that up for me.
Yeah.
Amen.
And just to like mention a very simple, visible, easy example is in terms of the way that we're expected to dress as Muslims, right?
Right.
There are very clear biological differences between men and women, and as expected, there is a different standard of what is required of dress. Both men and women, we have, it's expected for us to be modest. However, that modesty is shown differently when comparing men and women, right? So men have a particular dress code Islamically, and women have their dress code Islamically.
Okay. And that was good because I was going to ask for like an example, but that was really like it cleared up for the most part. But it does all make sense because it's certain things that other people aren't capable of doing, and that's one thing I love love about Islam is that it's an adjustment. It's not impossible to do these things, to do the right thing and stay steadfast. It may be difficult task, but it's me as a revert. It's a lot of things that I'm doing differently now because I grew up I was accustomed to certain things for 20 plus years, 24 plus years.
What's one major thing that you're doing different now, if I may ask?
My diet,
Okay.
thinking.
So the bacon is out.
Yeah, thinking, but like my patience, like during Ramadan, alhamdulillah, I had so much patience because I'm not doing too much because I might not have enough energy to do anything else that could have just sidetracked me from doing what I want to do. And just about putting certain foods in my body, just eating halal,
It is halal bacon.
healthier, fasting, you know what I'm saying? So that and just actually taking my time out. It was one thing I had noticed one time when I was on Mega Salah and my friends were calling me like to come outside. I didn't have time to go outside because I was praying. And then by the time I was done praying, I was reading the Quran. So then by the time I'm done reading the Quran, I don't want to do anything. I'm not coming outside. And then, you know, who knows what outside would have led to. So I was just thinking about that. I'm spending so much time, you know, focusing on my deen and trying to be a good servant to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I don't have time to just do meaningless things that I had time to do before, like just hanging out or just you know, just letting life pass me by.
Okay, so in other words, you're able to structure your priorities and your schedule in a better way.
Yes, absolutely. And
are you married, Romeo?
No.
With a name like Romeo, you're not married, bro?
No, not yet. Soon, inshallah.
All right, so
Inshallah.
these marriage questions you're asking, you're getting ready.
Right. But yeah, it just it's been, you know, very helpful, you know, trying to prioritizing better as well. And I'm learning more about myself because there's a lot of things that I will react to, even questions that I have for you. Is just I wasn't thinking this way before, and I wasn't feeling the way I felt before, and it's just I feel more clear. I feel more at one. I feel more at peace. I feel like a breath of fresh air. Alhamdulillah. So yeah, that was mainly it though. But yeah, inshallah, I soon do get married. I just have a lot of things I'm still working on internally myself. So I can prepare myself for that responsibility. And that like led into my question as far as like being a Muslim man, right? Being a Muslim husband, what is the responsibilities and what is the responsibilities for a Muslim wife as well? So that was like my second question, because I know there's I don't know too much for sure, but I know it's a different kind of, you know, expectations as far as that.
Yeah.
So
gotcha.
yeah, okay. So you know, one thing before I answer the question that I think it's important to mention as well is that nowadays a lot of people, they're trying to blur the lines that differentiate both genders, right? They're trying to say that there's no difference, or they may have a very convoluted understanding concerning our differences, right? So I think for a lot of people, they know that that's not the correct approach, and they're looking for something that has like concrete, solid answers, you know. And as human beings, you know, we have a fitrah, we have a natural inclination towards, you know, a certain way that God has created us, right? So I feel like when a lot of people, when they learn about the Islamic conception of, you know, gender differences in general and the roles of a husband and wife specifically, I feel like a lot of people, they're attracted to that, because in a world where people are very confused concerning this very topic, you find that Islam is very clear, and it's very organized, and it makes sense, and it aligns with the natural disposition of a human being, right? So now, I guess I can start off with, let's say, the husband's rights, right? And then Sheikh Shakiel can maybe then comment on the wife's rights. In the Quran, we have a verse in Surah number 4, Surah An-Nisa, the chapter of women, where Allah Azza wa Jalla, He tells us, "Al-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa," that men are qawwamun over women or concerning women. Now, qawwamun can be translated in many different ways. It's an Arabic word that has multiple layers of meaning. But qawwamun, in one way that it could be translated is those who are responsible, those who are maintainers, those who are protectors. So that's the expectation of a man in the household, is that he has the responsibility to he has the ultimate responsibility in the entire family, right? And there's a beautiful prophetic saying of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he tells us that a man is a shepherd over his flock, and his household is his flock, and he will be asked about them. And a woman is also a shepherd over her husband's house and his children, and she'll be asked about them. And the Prophet ﷺ, he also tells us that every single one of you is a shepherd, and he will be asked about his flock. So I think nowadays, when we talk about spouse roles, you see, I feel like maybe in our societies, we're so obsessed with talking about rights. What do we deserve? What do we deserve? What do we, what do other people owe us? Like we're always just talking about that. But you can't talk about that until you also speak about your responsibilities towards others, right? Everyone wants to talk about what should I get, but nobody's talking about what I should give. So the responsibilities of a husband is to be the leader in the family, and that's not necessarily something where it's like a privilege. No, it's a responsibility, as the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ says that everyone will be asked about his flock, meaning that everyone is a shepherd, right? And they have responsibilities under them, and they will be asked about them. In the Quran, you read various different surahs of the Quran. Allah talks about people running away from their family members. One of the examples that Allah mentions is that a man will run away from his wife and his kids. Now, why would people be running away from each other on Judgment Day? Why would a husband run away from his wife? Why would a father run away from his kids? Right? Allah, He tells us that every individual will have their own affairs to worry about on that day. And one of the reasons why, let's say, fathers or husbands will run away from their family members is because they had responsibilities towards those members of his family, and he neglected those responsibilities, and he's afraid that they're going to complain to Allah on Judgment Day, right? Because they could complain directly to Allah that, look, this man, my husband or my father or my brother, didn't take care of his responsibilities in the household, right? So they know what's coming, and they know that that's a day of judgment, and the fact that Allah will bring justice on that day, right? So I mean, it's very serious. So when Allah says that الرجال قوامون على النساء, that men are maintainers, protectors, responsible over women, it's not necessarily, a lot of people, a lot of brothers may give this like a thumbs up, like, oh great, oh yeah, that verse is talking about me as a husband, but it's also a big responsibility as well. So that's the husband's responsibility in the home in general. Now, obviously, that includes an array of different things, providing finances for the household, whether it be rent, providing food for the family, providing the means towards that, education for the family, whatever they need, right? Whatever tangible things they need to live, he's ultimately responsible for that. And it's not easy. It's it takes some some challenges, and that's why I think it's something great that you mentioned that you're trying to work on things within yourself so that you could be ready for that. It shows that you have the right mindset, right? And I think a lot of men, they just want to get married. They just want to get married, but they're not thinking of this, right? Like, okay, you're gonna fulfill your desires in a permissible way. You're gonna have a female companion, but what about what's gonna happen after that? What about the bill? What are you doing right now? Are you working? Are you working towards something? You have to be able to provide something for your household.
And that was like
the husband's, husband and father's responsibility in general. But like I said, there's dozens of things we can talk about under this particular general principle.
Right. So question. So I know the man provides. Is it looked down upon? You ever seen you ever heard about going Dutch? So say if a husband and the wife was to go out to dinner, and the wife wanted to treat the husband to something, that they go half on the bill, or she pays the bill without him knowing or something. Is stuff like that looked down upon?
Shakiel.
So I think that's an interesting question. I just want to backtrack a little bit, if that's okay, Romeo. So I think so when it comes to the man being responsible, one of the first things you probably hear from a lot of people in today's societies is that this is if the man is responsible financially for the household, right, and a woman's expenses, that's a form of control, right? And so with a woman's lib in 1960s, in the 1960s, started with the whole idea, when the birth control pill in the 1950s came out, and then the women are now able not to get pregnant and to dedicate time to their careers. basically saying that marriage is just an option right now. We don't even have to get married or have children. This has given us freedom, and we have financial freedom, right? And so when we say these things, like, the man is the head of the household, the man is responsible for the finances of a household, it's important to understand in what context we're saying it, and not to make a logical fallacy of comparing it with apples and oranges of what existed in the 20th century in certain societies like the United States of America. So let's take, for example, the United States of America. When a man was the head of the household, women had economic dependence on the man, right? And number two, a lot of Christians in certain denominations are not allowed to get divorce. So in other words, when a woman marries, she has no exit from a bad marriage. She's stuck, and she's economically dependent on a man, right? And on top of that, she doesn't have the ability of having ownership. Like when the marriage would happen, the woman would take the last name of the husband because it's seen in the common law as she's now his property. And not only that, whatever she owned would now fall under the husband's ownership, right? So this is where all of this is coming from. It's coming from that context. It is in Islam, we never had that context. And this is ironic. We're talking about like the 15th century, 16th century, right? When until later on, women got the right to own property, etc. We're talking about centuries in Islam that never existed for Muslims. Because from day one, when a Muslim woman marries a Muslim man, she never takes his last name. She's not his property, right? She's the daughter of her father, right? That the name is so and so, daughter of the father, right? And so, and from day one, she has the right to own property. She has individual ownership. She can work. She can have a career. She can make money. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was married to Khadija, who was an entrepreneur, right? So she had money. She was rich. She was wealthy. So the idea of seeing that just because the man is the head of a household, it creates this environment of control and economic dependence on the woman. It's valid in a certain context, but not in the Islamic context, right? Because of what I've just explained, right? And so in Islam, a woman has all these rights already for centuries ago, right? So in Islam, what is it? It's not economic dependence. What it is it's economic service. A man is economically serving the woman. He's responsible for 100% of her expenses. So when you go out to the restaurant, he's responsible for feeding her and making sure there's food there. So when you go to the restaurant, he has to pay the bill, right? 100%. There's no 50-50, right? And, if you look at when people date, I'm not saying that dating is something that's, condoned by Islam, but just using it as an empirical data point. When people date, if the guy says to the lady or to the woman, right, let's split the bill 50-50, or when the bill comes, he gets up and goes to the bathroom, all of a sudden, so she can pay the bill, do you think he's going to get a second date?
Nope.
It's not happening, right? If he says 50-50 or says, why don't you take this first bill, or he says 50-50, he's not getting a second date. It's over right there, right? So what does that tell us, right? If we're just using dating as an empirical data point, it tells us what women want inherently. They want to be provided for. They want to be taken care of. And they will look for a man that will take care of them. And this has been proven over and over again. For example, Norway, right? The United Nations over decades has said that Norway is the most gender equal society in the world, right? They so ensure that these two genders have equal opportunities in everything, right? But yet when we look into the household, do we find that the husband, what would you imagine in this situation if they have equal opportunities? Would you imagine that husbands and wives would make similar amounts of salaries and income, right? Because they have equal opportunities, right?
Yeah.
But what the data shows us is that that's not the case. The data shows us that despite the fact that they're equal opportunities and Norway is the most gender equal society in the world, we see that the households are formed where the man makes more than the woman, because there's something called hypergamy, where a woman will want to partner up when it comes to finances. You ask any woman, would you marry someone who's poorer than you? If you make $100,000, would you marry a man that will make $50,000? Right? Overwhelmingly, women will say absolutely not. Why? Because it's inherent in women that they want to marry someone who's financially stronger, because that's a sign of stability. And they also found that those who were not making these high salaries ended up not being able to be matched, right? And so this shows us over and over again, even in today's society, even in a place like Norway, that women will always prefer men to be the breadwinners and to be there to take care of financial responsibility, because they are looking for stability, right? When women look for marriage, for a man for marriage, what they usually look for is stability, right? And a man, by his nature, when he has money, what does he want to do with it? He wants to spend it on his family. He wants to, by his nature, a true man by his nature will want to take care of his woman, take care of his children, and spend on them, right? And this is why, Allah says in the Quran, "Ar-rijalu qawwamuna 'ala an-nisa," that men are the providers and protectors over women, right? This is their responsibility. And it's interesting here because in the Arabic language, Allah could have said "Ar-rijal qa'imun." Qa'imun means that they're protectors and providers. But there's a difference between qa'imun and qawwamun. Qawwamun is what's called sighatul mubalagha in the Arabic language. It's an intense form, meaning that they're constantly protecting and providing. And so this is the nature that a man will never leave, his house without food in the fridge, or his kids starving, or abandoned. That's not the true nature of a man. That's not manhood. And not only that, Allah didn't say in this verse, He didn't say, "Ya ayyuhar rijal kunu qawamin." Oh men, be protectors and providers ala nisa, over women. Allah didn't say that. He could have addressed the men. If Allah said that, it would have been a direct commandment, right? It's a commandment that be protectors and providers over women. That would have been a commandment. But the way Allah phrased this verse is not in a commandment form, like don't, do not steal, don't lie. Those are commandments, right? So God didn't phrase this in a commandment form. God is saying men are constantly protecting and providing for women. So this is a statement which gives us the feeling that this statement is talking about who men are, that this is the reality, that a command, this is stronger than the commandment, because God is describing a statement here that is defining what the reality is outside, that men are protectors and providers of women. This is who men are, and this is what you should be doing anyway. There's no need to give a direct commandment here, because that's the definition of a man. And so that's stronger than a commandment, because if God gives a commandment, you could either do it or not do it, right? But here God is not giving a commandment. He's saying this is who men are, and this is what they should be doing. And so we see throughout history, over the centuries, we see this has been the case, that men have been providing constantly, and women have the want to feel protected and provided, right? And this trickles down to the littlest of examples, that women want you to hold the door for them, right? Right? They want that, right? They want you to pay the bill, right? That's the innate nature. They want to be felt that they're cared for, right? And so that, I think, is in line in what is the nature of man and woman. But we have to, as I mentioned earlier, remember that when we talk about the man being the head of the household, it's not in the context of what exists in let's say in America or in Europe. It's in the context where a woman has the right to own property already, where a woman can make money, and whatever she makes, she's not obligated to spend a penny on any bills or expenses of the household. She could be a millionaire. Let's say her business exploded. She could be a millionaire, and she's not required in Islam to pay the utility bill, pay the mortgage, or any of that. That's only on the man, right? So the idea of economic dependence and control, that doesn't exist in the Islamic framework.
Now, one thing is that like the Sheikh was talking about how women, they naturally want this. I mean, the fact that women want this, it's not a learned characteristic. It's not like women all around the world, somehow were indoctrinated to feel this way about men, right? Like that, the fact that they want men who can provide and protect and take care of them, right? If you think about how it's instinctively something that you find across the board, is that if you think about it from a woman's perspective, whether she's actively thinking it or not, instinctively, deep down inside, she understands that one day she's going to become pregnant. She's not going to be able to physically do what she was able to do before this, whether it be even work, providing for herself, whatever the case is. And then she might be breastfeeding, taking care of a child, right? It makes perfect sense why women would naturally want a man who would be able to do things that she may not be able to do herself because of those very things, right? Now, one thing that you asked about as well is, like, let's say she wants to give him a gift, or she wants to, let's say she, out of the kindness of her heart, she wants to, help him with, something. When we say this, it's the man's responsibility. That's kind of like what's expected of him. However, and when we understand what's expected of him, there's the understanding that it's not expected of her. But can she, out of her goodwill, can she help her husband? Can she give him a gift, right? Can she do out of charity, from the goodness of her heart, right? Can she buy him a gift, for example, right? She can do all of these things, but she can't be expected to do so as if this is her role or her responsibility, right? But I mean, totally, the Prophet ﷺ, he tells us that give gifts, and this will be something that brings about love, right? So definitely, you can give gifts. A woman can give gifts. Husband should definitely give his wife gifts as well, right? But it's not as if it's her obligation.
Yeah, thank you for clearing that up, because I was going to ask that next too, like about gifts and stuff like that. So, question. So, backtracking, how is like dating? I know we're not supposed to date. How does that go about? How do you find your wife without getting to know them, really?
Sheikh, we can.
So yeah, so I think it's an interesting question, and the first thing we get that a lot. Hey, in Islam, if you're not dating, how are you going to find your partner, or find a spouse? How does that happen? But what's interesting is that dating is basically a new phenomenon, right? That came about in the 1860s, so it's about 150 years plus old. It's just basically new, right? And dating started with prostitution. Prostitutes used to date. So before they would actually get contracted, if you want to use the word contracted for service, they would actually date men and then decide if they want to go with that man, right? And so I think it's interesting to analyze, and I think in legal matters, right? You heard of sugar dating, right? Being a sugar daddy and stuff like that, right? So there's now issues of legally trying to differentiate that sugar dating with prostitution, right? There's like a fine line. But what's interesting is that all of this actually came out of prostitution, right? And so I think if you look at what is the definition of prostitution, right? Prostitution is when you exchange something in value for some service, right? And so when you look at dating, I want to know, how is that different, right? You take someone out, you're exchanging something of value. You're going to spend $100, $200 on that dinner, right? Hoping that it'll get you a second date, hoping it'll get you a third date, right? And then hopefully you'll get service, right? Just trying to use.
Sometimes it doesn't even need to get that far.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes if alcohol is involved, it goes faster, right? Another reason why alcohol is not allowed in Islam, right? And so the first thing is to really look into, is dating and prostitution that different? And legal experts are being challenged with this right now. There are sugar dating sites and stuff that are being challenged with these kind of legal challenges of it being, prostitution is a fine line. So that's one. Number two, it also shows us kind of like, that we're conditioned with our societies. I remember when I was young, my neighbor, she came over and she asked me, if you guys don't date, how do you guys get married, right? And I was a little kid and I had no idea. I just knew that we didn't date, right? And I had no answer because we're conditioned with our societies and that's all we see. And so, because this is how people get to know one another and that's it, right? But if this came about 150 years ago, the question is, for centuries, how have people been getting married and getting to know one another, right? So there are other better ways. Like, you don't have to date a woman, take her time, or even sleep with her to get to know her. There are other ways without having to compromise her value, right? So when you look at why dating is not allowed in Islam, number one, is that it's harmful for the women to begin with, right? Because the more a woman dates, the more challenging it becomes for her to get married. What do women look for in a marriage? They look for, so when it comes to a woman looking for a husband, she thinks about the future, right? She thinks about, is my future going to be stable with this guy? And when a guy looks for a wife or a woman, he doesn't look at he doesn't really look into the future, right? He does, but I mean, not as much as a woman would when it comes to stability, right? He knows he's making money. He knows he'll find another job. He'll work. He'll make it happen. So while a woman looks into the future, a man looks into the past and says, what's your past? What's your body count? How many people have you been with? Right. And you ask any man on the street, if a woman has been with X amount of men versus a woman that has not been with any man, who would he prefer?
The one that hasn't been with any.
So that's our, what we call fitra. That's our innate nature, right? And so it's disadvantageous, number one, for women. And while women think that, okay, well, I'm 25, I can date and I can have, I can have fun while doing it, and in the process, I'll try to find a spouse, right? Our biological clocks are different, right? Men's ability to reproduce lasts way longer than women. And so when a woman reaches 35 years of age and she's not married, it becomes difficult. And also then having children at that age, there are issues with pregnancy and so on and so forth. So her biological clock limits her. And so while society says, you should do what you want, the focus is only on the individual, and they compromise the concept of the family, they have her running around dating. When the time comes for marriage, then she kind of gets lonely in the mid 30s and the 40s, and it gets kind of lonely then, right? And so she's wasted her prime. Whereas Islam says, well, you have your prime, you use your prime to have a family and settle down, so that when you're in your 40s and 50s, you don't have to worry about stability anymore. And it's a win-win, because that's what men want as well. Men don't want women that have been around, with a lot of people, etc. Right? And so we see that, number one, dating is disadvantageous to women. It's oppressive to women. And there have been studies that have been done where they've studied men and women who have dated, and they've found that those who cohabit before marriage, that their marriage is more likely to have negative communication, more likely to end up in divorce, and more likely to be in trouble. So dating does not help, right? And then the idea of, okay, I'm trying to find my spouse, right? Well, we have 14-year-olds that are dating, 16-year-olds that are dating, 17-year-olds that are dating, right?
Right.
Are they thinking about marriage? Right. So it's not. You have 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, right? in some circumstances or situations that it's happening. No one's thinking about marriage. It's all about having fun. But in the process, it's more disadvantageous to the woman, right? And so these studies have shown that it's harmful for the women. There are studies that show that 65% of women that have dated, that they have been harassed while they were dating with their dating partner. So to protect women, to protect their value, to protect their integrity, dating is not allowed in Islam. That's number one. Number two, dating doesn't scientifically lead you to what you think you want it to lead you to, meaning I want to find my spouse. Because what happens in dating, right? When people date, and especially for women, they feel like they're being auditioned. Because who's the one who's going to propose? Mostly.
Right.
It's the man who's going to propose, right?
Yeah,
she's
man,
waiting
yes.
for that ring. She's waiting for the proposal. So she's auditioning. And while she's auditioning, if she sees some red flags in a man, she's going to be silent about it because she wants the proposal. She doesn't want to cause problems, right? And so when the marriage does happen and those red flags continue, now she's going to talk about it. And the guy is confused and says, wait a minute. You never mentioned anything about this when we dated. Why is it being mentioned? Right? She got the proposal. She feels secure. She feels stable. Now she's going to talk about it because remember, a woman is concerned about stability and she's not going to bring that up while they're dating. Right. So this causes problems. And so scientifically, it doesn't really lead you to find out the right person because people are not necessarily being open at that point. Right. And a lot of times women find themselves that they slide into marriage, right? Oh, it just happened that we cohabited. Oh, it just happened we were dating and it just happened that we ended up living together. And guess what? It happened that we bought a house together and we're paying the mortgage on this house. She feels stuck. And then, it just happened. The next most logical thing was we just got married. Does she really want to get married with this guy? It's just that the steps of dating went so far that to reverse that, it's so difficult now. Now she's stuck in this marriage, right? So Islam takes all that out and protects the woman from that, right? And then that there are other avenues and other ways of how we can get to know one another, right? And so this is the problem when you have a society that's based only on individuals, right? But if you have a society that's based on family and community, there's other ways through families and communities where you can get to know one another in a way where it doesn't require you to compromise the honor and the value of a woman.
And do you have an example on how you would get to know your spouse, or know your other whoever? I know you're not dating, but how would you go about that? How would you go about picking or deciding okay, I want that to be my wife, or I'm interested in you and I want to take this up further?
First, if your name is Romeo, I don't think you have to worry about that because that name itself is very romantic. So you're ahead of a lot of people already, I think, right? I'll let the Sheikh answer this one here. Get some examples.
All right. So I mean, all right. Look, if you read the Quran, are you going to find a list of verses that specifically mention okay, these are the 5 ways to find the spouse? If you look at the prophetic sunnah, the tradition of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are you going to find him listing the 10 ways? These are the only 10 ways that you can find the spouse. No, you're not going to find it like that. However, you will find guidelines. You will find parameters that you can kind of work around. So, for example, it's not permissible to be alone with a member of the opposite gender. It's not permissible to touch each other. It's not permissible to look at each other with desire, right? With lust. All of these things are there to protect both genders from engaging with each other in a way that displeases Allah, right? It protects them from fornication and doing anything else that would tarnish their relationship with Allah, because that's the ultimate goal, and that is to please Allah, right? So there is no prescribed way specifically to find a spouse, because there are a range of different scenarios that can play, right? But the end goal, or the way that the marriage has to happen, there are prescribed ways to do this. For example, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us that there's no marriage without the wali, without the representative, the guardian of the bride, right? So there's a certain process of marriage that is prescribed. It's very specific there's a particular way that it has to happen. But in terms of finding someone, and I think that's what you're asking about, in terms of finding someone who you are even going to propose to her father, right? How do you go about that? So if you read the Quran, you're going to find an example of Musa alayhi salam. So Moses, after leaving Egypt, he didn't have a job, he didn't have a home, right? He was jobless, he was homeless, he didn't have anything, right? And he passed by a place called Midian. And when he went to that place, he found that there were some people that were giving their animals water to drink. And he's just there and he's just observing what's happening. He sees that these two women who are keeping their animals back, they're not getting a chance to go because there are men over there. So Musa, what he does is he notices these women are having a hard time. He goes over and he offers to them to water their animals for them, to give their animals water. And he does that. And then he leaves them on their way, right? And he doesn't engage in any further conversation. He's not trying to be smooth or anything like that. He did this purely from the goodness of his heart. He saw that they weren't being given a chance, so he wanted to go help them out. He then goes and he sits by a tree and he makes dua to Allah, saying that, "My Lord, whatever good you can give me, I'm in need of." And immediately one of the women came walking towards him, and Allah mentions in the surah that فَجَاءَتْهُ إِحْدَاهُمَا تَمْشِي عَلَى اسْتِحْيَاءٍ. One of the women, they were both sisters, they came walking to him with shyness, with modesty, right? Even the way that she walked was modest. And she said that, "Our father, we told him what you did for us and he'd like to invite you over." Right? So Musa alayhi salam, he responded positively to their invitation. He went to the house, he spoke to the father, and then the father, he offered Musa to marry one of his daughters to him. If you look at this whole interaction, right, it was not really planned. If you think about it, right, it wasn't planned. It wasn't like Musa deliberately helped them water their animals so that he can marry one of them. No. So in life, you are going to be put in situations, whether it's at work, whether it's being in the community, whether it's you hearing of a sister. And I think that's one of the things that the Sheikh mentioned, and that is that when you're part of a community, it makes this so much easier, because when you're by yourself, when you're in your house and you're not part of a community, you're not interacting with people, then it makes it really hard to not only find a sister, but even to find brothers, to find friendly brothers that you can form a bond with. So I think when you're part of a community, one example that I mentioned is of Musa alayhi salam. That's a scenario as to how it could play out. Another, I guess, practical scenario today is that, let's say you go to the masjid and you know of a particular brother and you learn about his family. You learn just by being around brothers in the masjid, you're gonna learn about this, right? You're gonna volunteer in the masjid, you're gonna hear that there are sisters that are volunteering. You might talk to a brother and he mentions something about his sister, or somebody tells you something. You can approach the sister through her brother and you can just say, "Look, I want to find out more. I'm looking to get married." Right? And that brother, or sometimes what might even happen is a brother in the masjid, he sees you, he likes how you are, he sees that you can be like his brother-in-law, for example, right? Or maybe he might have a niece, right? You can let people in the community know that you're looking to get married. Some Muslim communities, they may even have like specific programs, like matrimonial services, right? So you can get to know who's who, and then you could sort of start the process by speaking to her family. And it's not as if you can't have a conversation with her. It's not like you can't speak to her, right? They could be sit downs, right? And like I said, people may call this dating. I mean, putting the words aside, it might be a scenario like this where the sister is there that you're trying to speak to, her father is there, her brother is there, her family is there, right? Your family might even get involved as well, and you sit down together and you discuss what your plans are. You speak to them, they get to know you, you get to know them, and this is like a safe way of going about it. This is like one way that that it could possibly happen, and this happened for many brothers and sisters, right? So like I said, there's no specific prescribed way, but this is just like, these are a couple practical ways that people, many Muslims have gotten married through in the past and present.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that leads up to okay, so say you do find someone that you're interested in, right? What is the steps that you take as far as how do you make that proposal? And like, say you do get married, how would a wedding, how was that whole event? How does that play out? Because I'm sure it's pretty different from your modern wedding that I probably grew up going to. You know what I'm saying? So how would those events even unravel?
Yeah, I think before we go into that, I just wanted to add some more to what Sheikh Zakaria said, if that's okay, Romeo.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think one thing that I find very beautiful about Islam is that when it comes to marriage, or finding a spouse, there's a balance between feelings and making logical decisions on which spouse is going to be the best one for you for the rest of your life, right? Whereas the dating process, the feelings surge, and a lot of us are conditioned because of what we've seen on seen at the movies, or seen in TV shows where dating is all about having this feeling and falling in love, and then not even really knowing the person properly, ironically, right? And later on finding out surprising things about the person. And so what Islam does is, it's not only about the feelings, it's very much so about making a logical decision if this is the right person for you. And so Islam provides a white glove service to women, right? So a woman has her father, if the father's not available, right? His brothers, his other male relatives who are involved in the process. Because you and I know as men that, men, a lot of men talk about how they can easily, sway a woman, sweet talk a woman into a date and then whatever, right? But you can't do that in front of another man. It's not going to happen, right? Would you agree?
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
Very difficult, because men know what men are doing, right?
Right.
And so if you're going to, so the presence of the father and the engagement of the father in the process allows for this white glove service to happen, where the father will look through the situation, look through the man, say, listen, you're trying, you're not serious, right? And also where the man can now directly, from man to man, question the other man, like, what's your financial capabilities, right? What's your situation with work and your income? They can have this kind of direct conversation, which makes the man know that he has to be ready if he's going to speak or wants to get married or speak to someone, because the father will be involved. So it puts a man in a different mindset, right? Like, I'm going to ask you, or we can ask anyone, right? Any man, that if there's no man involved, would you think differently versus a man being involved that's going to be interviewing you and talking to you in a marriage process? What do you think? Do you think it's the same, or would it be different?
Yeah, I think it definitely be different.
Yeah. So
let's get that whole man presence, it's a different feel. When you're talking to, I feel like even men have a different tone in their voice, different posture.
100%.
Man versus when you're talking to a female. So it did change the whole aspect.
Right. So it's not, so a lot of marriages today are a lot of is based on feelings. And when people get emotionally involved, it's hard to use logic.
Mm-hmm.
Logic gets compromised. And so, and women get the shorter end of this stick a lot of the times, where they'll say, I saw red flags, but she just let it go because now she's emotionally involved.
Mm-hmm.
So what Islam does is, for the protection of women, does not allow the emotions to escalate to a certain degree where it will be detrimental for the woman. And that's by, number one, having the father involved, right? Even to the point, if the father's not alive, then you have, a brother, right? If not, she has no brother, you have the uncle, you have a male relative. She has no male relatives, right? Then in Islam, the head of state appoints someone and gets involved. This is how important it is. Because remember what we mentioned earlier, that the foundation of a society is the family. So Islam takes this serious, right? So we all want, live happily ever after until death, right? But the work for that has to go before marriage. A lot of people think that work has to go in marriage. No, but a lot of that has to go before marriage, to make sure that your chances of success are high by going through this vetting process, right? And so this also shows you the importance of community, right? It's not just the hyper focus on the individual. We're in a community, we all know each other, and we may not know each other very well, but you can definitely find someone that knows someone very well and say, hey, what do you know about that person? You know, would you recommend that person for my sister, or et cetera, et cetera? And someone could say, well, that guy's very stingy. You know, if you want to, you're not going to have, your sister's not going to have a good life, but you'll get to know a lot of things, right? And this is why also in Islam, we have the prayers, right, legislated 5 times in the mosque, right? The mosque forms as the basis for a community where people come 5 times during the day to meet each other and see each other. And you meet people you've never known, simply because they live around the mosque area and you get to know one another, right? You have the Eid prayers, but people just come out. You have weekly Friday, right, prayers as well. And so there's these avenues that Islam has created to form that community. And this is why the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he went to Medina, one of the first things he did was built a masjid, built a mosque, right? Because that is an important element for creating a community. So it's not like everyone's out on their own, right? And then there's also in Islam something called the khitbah period, where you have an engagement period. You have the ability to ask questions of this person you're interested to get married with. Like the Sheikh mentioned, there can be sit downs, right? But it has to be the presence of the male, the father, or someone that takes his place, where to ensure that this man is not trying to fool around, right? So Islam, you know, forbids any kind of premarital relationships with a woman. And the message to the man is that before you even touch a woman, you can't even shake her hand. Before you even touch a woman, you have to prove your financial responsibility. You have to prove that you're a man. You have to show that you have the financial ability to take care of her, right? And this is why the dowry is we have the dowry in Islam, where a man gives a dowry to the woman. The woman can ask for whatever she wants, $10,000, $20,000, whatever she wants. And that's a symbolic gesture from the man when he gives the dowry, that, hey, I'm giving you this $5,000. This is symbolic that there's more where this came from. I can take care of you, right? And so the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, even told a poor person who didn't have anything to even find, you know, a piece of iron, something of value, to give it, right? And we're talking about people that were extremely destitute, right? So there are certain exceptions, but this is the choice of a woman. She can ask for what she wants, right? For her, because what does a woman look for? She wants stability. So Islam allows her to ask for the level of stability that she wants. And if the guy is someone who really wants to marry her, he'll work and pay that dowry, and then she gets to keep that dowry, and that's her security. She can use that for whatever she wants, right? So there is this get to know period through the community, through families, and once you have a community, the ideal way is that the community people they grow up together, right? People grow up together. They go to school. They're going to schools together, and they're going to the mosque together, and so you have people getting to know one another, right? So you would get to know brothers because you went to the same school. Sisters would know each other because they went to the same school, and then you have brothers and sisters that can refer each other, and then you have the get to know process with the father involved as well, right? And then you can set a date for marriage, etc.
Okay. And I don't know, Brother Zachary has something to say. So, forward from that, right? How does the wedding play out? Like,
right. Your question. So let's say you have a get to know period with a father and her daughter, and this, you know, in these sessions you ask these logical questions, right? Like, what is life going to be like, right? What are there are things that people don't ask before marriage, and then in marriage they start wishing they asked for, and this is why the father's also there to help her, because he's gone through marriage and say, listen, are you sure you want to ask about this? Are you sure you're okay with that? And these things need to be resolved before marriage, right? Who's going to do what, and who's going to, you know, what's her concept, right? Of the husband and wife's roles, etc. Right? Is she aware of what Islam is saying? Because we live in, you know, in societies where we're being conditioned, right? And so that's necessary. And so, you know, if you're interested, then what it is that the when you're interested in someone, the man goes to the father and asks for her hand in marriage, right? And so then the father has the opportunity now to interview him and vet him himself, right? And then he'll take that information and share it with his daughter. And then if she agrees, right, because there's no forced marriages in Islam, there's no arranged, marriages. She has the right to consent, and if she agrees and she consents, right, then the marriage moves forward, right? And so the actual marriage itself, there's a method of that. I'll let Sheikh Zakaria to chime in on the actual nikah, what happens in the nikah scenario. I think that's what you're asking for the wedding itself, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. So being very brief, in terms of just laying out the process. So we're at the position now where the man, he understands who he wants to get married to, and there's a mutual understanding between both of them, in terms of expressing their desire to get married. So he'll go to the wali of the bride, who would be her father or her brother, and he'll make a proposal, express his desire to get married, and if there's a mutual feeling between both parties, then they'll get into an engagement. And an engagement, there's specific rulings pertaining to an engagement. They're not married yet; they're still not married, right? So the same things that are impermissible outside of marriage are also impermissible in the stage as well. However, it's simply an agreement that they're going to get married. So another example of a specific ruling pertaining to an engagement is that if a woman is engaged to a man, it's not permitted for another man to then propose to her, right? Because that would be like a guy like stepping on the shoes of his brother, right? Nobody would want to be put in that position, right? So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he tells us that none of you should overstep his brother in proposing to a woman in marriage, right? Now once the engagement process, now there's no particular limit to the engagement process. Normally people can be in this process in this stage for 6 months to a year, maybe even more. And then basically in this process, Muslims usually plan the wedding. In Islam, it's not required for the wedding to be in any particular location. It could be in the masjid, it could be anywhere. But it's very simple. It's something very simple. You find a lot of Muslims do their own cultural celebrations, and there's nothing wrong with that, providing that there's nothing that goes against Islam in these celebrations. But in the ceremony, basically, you will have the representative of the bride giving her hand in marriage to the groom, right? So he'll say that, Romeo, I give you my daughter's hand in marriage, right? Perhaps her name might be, Juliet, Allahu Alam, right? I'm sure there's a Muslim sister's named Juliet, right? But he'll say, Romeo, here's Juliet's hand in marriage. And then Romeo will say that I've accepted. And this takes place in the presence of two witnesses. And this is the beauty of Islam, is not only is there the representative of the bride that's adding a layer of protection, right? Because men know men best, right? Sometimes, we can see a guy doing something, we know exactly what he's doing. And sometimes, the girl, she's being spoken to, right? He's being smooth. She doesn't understand what he's doing. He's got this whole scenario played out in his head. He's going to, say something to her. He's going to act smooth, right? With some swag or whatever the case is, right? She may not catch on to what he's doing, but he's very crafty with it. Men, sometimes we see other men do this stuff. We know exactly what he's doing, right? So the wali is going to be able to vet him out. Not only that, you have other male witnesses in the ceremony as well. So it's required for there to be at least 2 male witnesses, and this is just an added layer of protection for the woman, right? Because there's so many cases of domestic violence, so many kinds of abuse that men do towards women, right? And Islam wants to prevent all of these things. So you have the witnesses there, and as long as this agreement takes place between the representative of the bride and the groom, right? That exchange, right, happens in the presence of 2 witnesses, then they are married immediately, right? So they're considered husband and wife. Normally people would sign papers. Normally people would do it in a wedding hall. There's also a wedding feast as well that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he commanded his companions to have. And a wedding feast, it could be anything, any kind of food that you invite people to. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he encouraged us very strongly to attend these wedding feasts. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he tells us that those who refuse to attend these feasts are, disobeying Allah and His Messenger, right? So it's very important to have this feast and also to attend it, as long as it doesn't contain anything that's haram or impermissible, right? But if it's a permissible gathering, then you should attend that gathering. And then there's also the dowry that the man has to give the woman, right? He can give some of it before this marriage contract is done, but it's definitely something that will remain as a debt from his part towards her until he pays it off, right? So, and the dowry can be anything of benefit to the woman. Some men, they give cash, they give money, they give jewelry, they give clothes. It can be anything that the woman is pleased with. That's very a very brief summary of the entire marriage process in a nutshell. And I'm sure that there's a ton of questions that I'm sure that the viewers have, I'm sure that you have as well, but that's kind of like a bird's eye glimpse through the whole process.
Thank you, facts. And then that leads me to another question. Okay, so we got through the dating, we got through the marriage. Can me being as a Muslim man, am I allowed to marry a woman outside of the religion, or a woman who doesn't specifically have a religion, but she believes in one God, one creator?
So, in Islam, when you became Muslim, you said the Shahada, right? And the Shahada, for someone to become Muslim, you say the Shahada, which is basically a testimony to monotheism. And monotheism is the first pillar of Islam. Monotheism is the first pillar of faith, of Iman, right? And that shows the importance of monotheism. And so the family, the structure of the family is also important so that monotheism can be preserved. So there are rules and regulations when it comes to marrying of other people of other religions, right? And so a Muslim man, of course, can marry a Muslim woman, but a Muslim man can also marry a Jew or a Christian, right? And there are certain conditions, right? She can't be someone that's, it has to be someone that's who's modest, right? And not someone's going to go on the beach with a bikini, right? And so there are certain conditions that go with that. And she should also, agree to that the children that will be raised, will be raised as a Muslim, because that's in the preservation of monotheism, right? And for a female Muslim, right, she's only allowed to marry a Muslim male because her rights that Islam give her can only be, guaranteed in a Muslim male's household, right? Whereas no one's going to tell her pay 50% of the bill, or no one's going to take away her rights and say you're my property, and stuff that we talked about that has happened in the past, right? Or things that may happen today, right? Where the person will force the person, you need to work. Why are you being a wife and a mother? You need to go out and work, or she's not required to, right? If she doesn't want to, right? And so for the protection of the Muslim woman and her rights, it's allowed for her to marry only a Muslim male. So the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, tunkah al-mar'atu li-arba', right? A woman is married for 4 things, right? For her wealth, for her status, for her beauty, and for her deen, right? A deen meaning for her religion. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, marry one for her deen, and you will be successful, right? And this is very important because in today's society, why should anyone get married?
So, me personally, I feel like depending on your mission, and this is before I took my Shahada, I'm big on legacy, and I'm big on unity. So that was my personal reason for me looking forward to marriage, is to build a family and to uplift my life around me and others' lives. So the things that I went through in my lifestyle, inshallah, my kids will have to go through, and they'll be more advanced because I may teach them a certain way, bring them up a certain way, and they can exude that onto the world. So that was my personal reason. Like before.
Okay, but someone can say, well, you can do that without getting married. You know, a man and woman can live together and have kids. Right in today's society, people are having kids before marriage, out of marriage, at any time. So they can say, well, you can have a legacy without marriage. We can live together. You have people who have been living together for 10, 15 years and never got married, and they have kids, and they're like, we feel united.
I feel like that creates a certain bond and expectation, like a certain unspoken rule. I could be wrong, but I feel personally that it's like an expectation. Like, so as far as it's different, like growing up, when you was dating somebody versus when they say, okay, you're my boyfriend, you're my girlfriend. You know what I'm saying? Before you're like, okay, we're just dating, to, oh, now you're my husband, now you're my wife. It's certain rules and certain unspoken expectations and certain guidelines that you go by when you put, when you put a title on things, when you make a certain bond.
Because dating, when people date, they know it's temporary. Right. And so and that's the problem with dating. That's another problem with dating, that it conditions you not to commit.
Right.
And so when you date one after another, you get conditioned that if there's a problem, I'm just going to dump the person and go get someone else. And so the person is now conditioned not to commit. And so marriages have the guy snores. That's it. I'm out. I'm divorcing you. Right. So so the conditioning is not there to help marriages survive and have a longevity, right? That's another reason why dating is not allowed in Islam, right? And so, but today's society, a man can say, for example, why should I even get married? A woman can say, I don't need to get married. I can work. I can provide for myself. I don't really need a guy. And there are women that say that I don't even need a guy today. This is outdated. I don't need a guy at all. I'm good. I'm fine by myself, right? Yes, we did mention it gets lonely after 30s and 40s, right? And it's hard to have kids, and you wish you had. There are women out there that are now advising younger women, listen, have kids. We wasted our prime time, right? A man could say, why should I even get married? If I have to get a divorce, all my hard worked, time and energy and money that I've made, 50% of that, someone else is going to walk away with that. Right? Why should I even work? Why should I even put that at risk? Right. And so and we see that this is being represented in societies. The family is crumbling. The amount of marriages are dropping. People are not getting married. Families are not happening. Right. You have an increase of single fathers. You have an increase of single mothers. It's creating this chaotic situation because there's a hyper focus on the individual. And with single mothers, the children are 5 times more likely to commit suicide. They're 20 times more likely to end up in prison, children who are raised by single moms. This is not the case with single dads. Right? Single dads are financially better and well off than the single moms, right? There are studies on this, right? And so again, not being in a marriage is disadvantageous to the woman again, because a single father can be better off than a single mom. And so she's suffering again. So the society has conditioned women to think that they're getting freedom, but at the end of the day, it's completely disadvantageous to women in so many different fronts, right? And so this is why that Islam focuses on marriage, and for anyone to feel like they should get married and respect the rules and regulations and responsibilities of marriage, there's only one thing that can really, really ensure. Yes, a person can say, well, I could be an honest man and I care for my wife and I love her, etc. That's fine. But to ensure that it's being done is to make marriage sacred. And the only way you make marriage sacred is that you have to make relationships permissible between the man and the woman by having this being permissible by a statement from God Almighty. And that's why when a man and woman is now being married, they have permission to touch one another, to be with one another by God's permission, right? And this is why the Prophet Muhammad said that a man marries a woman for 4 reasons, right? And he's told us to marry women for their religion. So he's making it sacred. And so and for men, when we understand, for men who understand responsibility and understand, who believe in God, that if this is sacred, I'm going to make sure that I do my best, right? And to the point that Prophet Muhammad said that, if you were to whatever you spend on your family, you get rewarded for that, right? So there's rewards for that. The highest reward is when you spend on your family more than if you were to spend on charities elsewhere or feed the poor. Spending your family is regarded as a higher reward. So this encourages men to take care of their families. And so people get married if they understand there's rewards in it for the hereafter. They understand it's sacred. You're getting God's permission, and then you take it seriously, right? And so we see in today's society, like what we're talking about, like from the 1960s to now, you have, the women's liberation movement, and that we believe that went to one other extreme, right? That women were oppressed, but it's gone to the other extreme and are still being oppressed, because when you say to a woman, you're not good enough until you do what a man does, you're not good enough until you be a man, we say that's oppression. And it goes back to the beginning of our conversation, that men and women are different, right? And the whole concept of equality and being just and not unjust, right? And so it's gone to the other extreme where women again are suffering. And so we see from 1960s to now, we see that the family has been crumbling. It's going to be getting worse. We see a rise in single fathers. We see a rise in single mothers. The women are disadvantageous. We see that when surveys are done, people are less happy than before. So what does that tell us? That the current way of living is not bringing us happiness, right? There's something wrong. And so this is why I love Islam, is that Islam has that balance between having a focus on the basic unit of society, which is the individual, and at the same time not compromising the foundation of society, which is a family, right? And I haven't seen anywhere else that has this beautiful equation and formula set out that's balanced so perfectly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree to 100%. And I was just thinking about like what you had asked me on why people get married, and every endpoint you made, I was just like, that's very important as far as what you started off with, as far as building a community, being, as far as the men's perspective, being a man and, providing, and how broken homes can affect this world tremendously. And as far as people being suicidal, people going to prison, this is like everything starts within the home.
Yeah, and so that a man can't get away with these things in society if the definition of a man is you have to take responsibilities and you have to be the breadwinner, right? You can't have an absent father in that situation, because every guy will say, "Bro, you're not a man. Get out of here. Who wants to hang out with you?" Right? Today's it's not looked down upon in circles of men, right? What happens in circles of men is like, "Oh, I got this woman, I got that woman, I got this woman. I was able to get her and move on without responsibilities." Right? Through dating and all that. So what we're doing is we're conditioning men not to take responsibilities, right? All you have to do is sweet talk a woman, say a few words, give her, a couple of dinners, and then the guy goes off bragging about it. And so that's all erased in Islam. Like, you can't do that to women. That is the highest form of disrespect to a female. And so Islam has this white glove service for women. You can't touch her. You can't be alone with her, right? Unless you have been vetted and you've proven that you're a man, and then you can request, right? As we just find the process, and then you can live together. So, I feel like this is a more honorable way to get to know one another, and to get married, and to remember that this has been going on for centuries. Dating is just a new phenomenon, basically.
I agree, because that saves a lot of time, and that saves a lot of energy in not mixing emotions as far as the women and men, because there's women who step out on men as well, and they have to deal with that. Like in the society I grew up in, and vice versa, as men doing that to women. So I feel like it's more effective, more efficient to be modest about how we go about dating. As far as like Islam is like how we go about dating, how we go about caring for one another and being very precise and careful with one another, like delicate to each other. But in a regular society, it's like free game for everybody. And then you have people that's growing up with hurt, or they grow up with a lack of knowledge with their emotion. They don't have emotional intelligence, or they just don't have certain intelligence at all how to interact with one another, or they're all in self issues or all self emotions, and it would exude in a in a very negative way. Yeah. So I feel like if people did take the time, and didn't make so like how you said about you can't touch one another, because that's honestly you could lead up to something. One simple touch, as far as men, you could get excited and you start wandering off. You forget about your original purpose. Women as well, emotions and lust and everything could, formulate into that, and you wouldn't be as focused on your purpose as to, why you even got into anything. So,
yep. Romy, you're in New York City?
Yes.
Okay, so we have an inshallah upcoming weekend seminar coming. It's called Fiqh of Romance and Marriage. So, and obviously this is a huge topic, but we'll go into more details there. So inshallah, hopefully you can come. Inshallah, yeah.
Yeah, just send me.
Yeah, there'll be details, inshallah, at the description. Inshallah, hopefully they'll put some details there, inshallah. We haven't, finalized the dates, but it'll be in this fall, inshallah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be excited to be a follower there. So I'll definitely be there. I can make it. Yeah. Oh, I don't know if you have something to say, brother. Sinners.
What was that?
Right? Oh yes. So, I mean, Sheikh Shakiel mentioned, so much concerning, especially dating, but I think it's one of the most important things, especially for sisters, to realize, women, whether you're Muslim or not, is that what you have is valuable, and when you date, you are devaluing yourself, because he's really the one that's benefiting from the relationship more than you are. He's getting what he wants from a marriage kind of relationship at a low cost without giving you what you deserve in that kind of relationship. So he's getting what he wants from you without giving you what you really deserve. So he's getting his enjoyment, and you're not getting the stability that you want. So women are always going to lose out on this. And one thing that you mentioned, Romeo, about especially like hugging, especially like in the workplace, when women just go and they hug their male coworkers. We're not even talking about in a way that's lustful or anything like that. But I mean, Romeo, you as a man, us being men, we understand, like what you said, men might get excited, and they do, right? It's like, and a lot of women, they think, oh, he's just my friend. Oh, well, oftentimes that friend, he's just waiting for his turn, right? He's just waiting for you to break up, waiting for him to make his next move. The average man that you think is just your friend, that you hug, you give him high fives, you give him all of this physical touch, and you think it's all friendly. And he is, he's like, yeah, he's getting value for free, right? So Islam, mandates modesty, not just for women, but also for men, but specifically for women when it comes to how the dress code is for women, is to protect what is valuable. Because when you just give something away for free, then you devalue that, right? So it's like, when we talk about feminism and women's value in protecting that honor, Islam is the best way to protect that honor, so that she doesn't give away her value for free, right? So it's very important to keep this in mind, and I think that there's a lot more that we could say. We have the interactive seminar coming up. Inshallah ta'ala, we're going to see you there, inshallah. And there's so much more, like I said, that we can talk about. So, Romeo, let us know if you have any more questions. And it was really great speaking to you, man.
Same here. Thank you for having me on the line. Appreciate it. This is amazing. I've been excited as soon as I heard that I was going to be up here with you guys. I was just like,
Yeah, Romeo, it's been great. Thanks for your questions were awesome. Hopefully you benefited. Hopefully the viewers have benefited. And like we said, there's a lot that we could say more, but inshallah we'll discuss some more at the upcoming seminars, inshallah.
absolutely.
Alhamdulillah, very engaging conversations. We're happy you were all able to join us for this video. Thank you for coming on the channel, Romeo. It was a pleasure. We pray that inshallah this is not only beneficial for yourself, but every single person watching this video right now. Be sure to look out for future videos, everyone, here at FKAD Institute. And how do you do so, you may ask? By subscribing to never miss out on future content just like this. Remember, if you'd like to come on the channel next, ask those difficult questions, go ahead and follow the link in the description down below. Take care, everyone, and as always, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.